politically that becomes a real problem for them, and they need to ask you to please not quite be so loud about this subject, they'll give you a call. They'll do it after they've mined your data, drilled down, found everything they can, run it through a lawyer with probably 100,000 laws in this country. Nobody really knows how many felonies there are in this country. Nobody has any idea exactly how many you are committing every day. But if the government decides they really want to put a little pressure on you, they will go through those laws and they will go through that moving x-ray of your life that they have accumulated.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into CrushTheStreet.com. I got a new guest today. He's an author. He's someone who's spent many years wrapping his mind around freedom, liberty, and privacy of the people, so much so that he wrote a fictional book on this topic. His name is Max Hernandez, author of the book Thieves Emporium. We'll have the links to where you can get this book in the description area. We're just going to have a discussion here about liberty, privacy, and just kind of pick this man's brain here and just get to know him here, especially as a first-time guest. So, Max, thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to be here, Kenneth.
Max, I wanted to start this interview off by just asking you, what are some of the most blatant forms of privacy that American citizens are giving up on a daily basis? I know you go through this in the book and you do it in such a good way, but here, let's start off there. I'll ask you that.
The list is so long that I really don't even know where to begin. This is a creeping problem that has been going on since World War II. And, it covers everything from your position location now being tracked all the time with a cell phone, through the fact that all your financial data is now available whether you like it or not, to the fact that the government has the ability to break into all of the digital devices in your environment and watch you and listen to you going on every day. And many people will say, it doesn't matter, I have nothing to hide. I'm a law-abiding person, I'm an honest person. There is no reason that I should be concerned that my information is being picked and saved by the government. And the reason that's not true is because the government now has tremendous power over you by drilling down through that database and picking out little bits and pieces that they like to, if they ever want to influence you. They can sit you down and say, listen, we have enough information to charge you with 12 crimes. If you don't do something for us, like maybe spy on your wife, for instance. It's also a concern in almost a constitutional way. To take an example, the people that support the Second Amendment like to claim that it's the foundation right that allows Americans to protect all their other rights. Because if you're armed, you can, in theory, rise up and prevent the state from taking any other rights away.
The Second Amendment, this is always an interesting dynamic for me, and just getting your thoughts on what you feel the government's goal is, the establishment, as far as taking people's gun rights away. What is the purpose of that, and what is the goal? I'd like you to hit on that a little harder.
I think the goal in a broad sense, and firearms are only one of those aspects of it, the goal is to completely take away every form of power from the individual American. Ownership of weapons is one of those forms of power. Financial wealth is another form of power. Just to take two immediate examples that occur to me. The ability to communicate with your neighbors in privacy as another form of power. They're determined to take every one of those away, and that includes the existence of firearms. The problem is that if the privacy of the average American is completely violated, then no matter what you do to ensure your right to own a firearm, they will find out that you own it. And that means they will come knock on your door when the time comes with some excuse or other as to why they have to take it. And whether you like it or not, standing there facing half a dozen potentially dangerous police officers who want the firearm that they know for certain you've got and can show you the evidence that you've got it, well, you know, you're going to wind up turning it over. If you have a wife, if you have a family, if you have any concern at all for not, you know, going up against such a group of people, you're going to wind up turning it over. That's why my argument is that the fundamental right in this country is not the ownership of firearms; it's the ability to remain anonymous while you own those firearms.
Yeah, no, that is interesting. And one of the things that, you know, and I'm just bringing this up to discussion.
Sure.
Of course, a few hundred years ago, when you know, the Constitution was written, the Bill of Rights, guns were, you know, and the arms that were had that by people, by the government, were almost on the same playing field. I mean, muskets, people had muskets, the government had muskets.
Sure.
Nowadays, you know, people have shotguns and handguns, but the government is just on a completely different level. Do you really think that the government cares about the minimal firearms that people have now compared to the ability to obliterate and really destroy people with the level of military power that they have?
Oh yes, I do. And you know, if there's any question about that, we can turn to several different wars that the United States has had experience in which they have been able to exercise their full military might against a diffuse enemy armed with nothing but the kinds of small arms you're talking about, and they have lost, or else done very, very badly. I mean, you can start it in Vietnam, and you can work your way down a long list. You know, Somalia, Black Hawk Down is a very graphic movie that shows what is involved. Unless you're willing to destroy the friend and foe by simply carpet bombing an entire city, you're going to have to go in there with what are really just the same class of weapons as the opposition you're facing. The big concern is not so much the weapons as the organization, because if the organization doesn't exist on the part of your opposition, and the government is very much aware of this, there is nothing to stop you from going through on a piecemeal basis and one by one, disarming and, if necessary, arresting the individuals involved. You know, this is the classic example of what the Germans would do when they would move into an occupied town that they first had that they wanted to take charge of. You know, they would lock everybody down in the house and then go by house by house with the list of the people that they wanted, and one by one pick them up. And because they had control of communications, because they had control of transportation, they were able to defeat their opposition in detail.
Yeah.
And so the biggest concern, you know, whereas guns are a critical part of it, the ability to maintain communications person to person, and the ability to maintain the privacy of those communications, the secrecy, if you will, of those communications, as well as the secrecy of your political position and the secrecy associated with whether or not you're armed, means that privacy is really the underlying right for everything that supports our freedom.
Yeah,
And
that's a
that's
great
why,
point.
I'm sorry.
That's a great point, and and I liked what you said about the situation, the examples of situations where we have had conflicts where people have used and countries have used small class warfare type arms and have done great damage to the opposing armies.
Yeah.
Our U.S. Army. So
And it's not just the U.S. I mean, after all, the Afghanis threw the Russians out before they threw us out.
sure.
Well, they haven't thrown us out, but they're doing a pretty good job of it. So this is not a situation that is just unique to the United States.
Max, let's talk about money here. And, this is something we talk about a lot here at Crush the Street. And the situation where we're moving towards a cashless society, this is certainly attributed to the fact that we have a failing fiat currency system, and it supports the fiat currency system if they are able to lock everyone into a cashless or digital society. But also, as you brought up, it's something to take away people's privacy. They see where you're spending your
Exactly.
money. They know
Exactly.
what you're doing. They know your habits. So please talk about this a little more and just share your initial thoughts.
Well, I think Bitcoin is a world changer. Bitcoin is something new under the sun that never existed before in the history of humanity. The ability to conduct a commercial transaction at a distance without any intermediate party, that has never existed before until now. If you want to conduct transactions with your neighbor, you can walk over to him and give him a gold coin or a Federal Reserve note or whatever he accepts as money, and he gives you whatever he's got to sell. But if you want to do it with me without going through a third party, there's just no way to do that until now. Now you can do it with Bitcoin, and that's a very significant event. And what that means is that we are going to eventually be able to hide all our commercial transactions through the cryptocurrency medium. Maybe not Bitcoin, because there is anonymity issues tied to Bitcoin that are significant. But if the government begins to step on that, the nature of action reaction is that Monero is suddenly going to appear as being the popular currency, and everybody's going to move to Monero. And if the government finds a way to start tracking Monero, somebody else will come out with an even more privacy-oriented form of money. So the financial aspects that you're talking about are very critical. Money is power. I mean, that was one of the reasons, I believe, why the government has been actively trying to destroy the middle class. Stalin did the same thing with the kulaks in Russia. He had to deal with a group of wealthy farmers. They were serfs, but nonetheless wealthy farmers, and he did it by starving them to death. The government is doing it in terms of the American middle class by financially starving them to death, by making them all poor so they no longer have any financial wherewithal to band together and try and fight back. That's one of the ways they're trying to take our power away. By going to Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, we wind up with the ability now, for the first time ever, to conduct underground commerce without the government having any way of tracking it, just as we used to do, or still can do, face-to-face with cash.
Max, is there any indication through your insight as to what the government is doing with the transactions and this digital currency? Not so much Bitcoin, but our U.S. dollars being in digital forms, credit cards and things like that, where we have this cashless society. Is there any indication as to what they're doing with this information at this point?
Well, yeah, I believe they're doing exactly the same as they are with all of the other wealth of information that they get. People say, well, I'm not important enough for the government to really be paying attention to me, which is true. And that's true in a financial sense that you're talking about. That's true with the tracking data on your cell phone that you're talking about. That's true with your browsing history online that you could be talking about. And what the government is doing with all of this data is just vacuuming it up and dumping in a great big giant shoebox. That's all they're doing. In fact, it would be more difficult for them to not get that information on you, Kenneth, because they'd have to set up a system to specifically avoid it. And it's not that they care about you right now. It's that they care about building up a massive dossier on every single person in the United States, so that if you start to do something politically that becomes a real problem for them and they need to ask you to please not quite be so loud about this subject, they'll give you a call. They'll do it after they've mined your data, drilled down, found everything they can, run it through a lawyer with probably 100,000 laws in this country. Nobody really knows how many felonies there are in this country. Nobody has any idea exactly how many you are committing every day. But if the government decides they really want to put a little pressure on you, they will go through those laws and they will go through that moving x-ray of your life that they have accumulated. They will match the two up, and then they will take you downtown and sit you down and say, okay, these are the things that we feel you have done. And they'll give you a list that's going to put you away for 99 years.
Wow.
And they'll say, okay, here's the deal. You can fight us in court on all these things and wind up being completely impoverished if you're lucky, and wind up in jail if you don't. Or you can please just let your political activities go for now and don't be quite so vocal about this. Okay, can we work something out? See, that's the situation we're all going to wind up being in if we're not careful.
Max, when I had spoke to you about a week ago, we were just chatting over the phone, and I had sent you an email, and I told you it's a Gmail address, and you were like, "Oh no, we need to fix that." Let's talk about that for a second here. What is the deal with Google that you have analyzed and your insight on this?
It's not just Google. It's large, centralized database systems. Those are the ones that the government can most easily vacuum up. It's much easier for the government to find out what you're doing with Google if your email is with Google, if your search engine is with Google, if your MapQuest activity or map viewing is with Google. The more things that you do with Google, the easier it is for them to go to Google and pay. They don't have to do anything difficult. They don't have to get a court order. They don't have to just pay Google a little money and say, by the way, here's would like a stream of everybody that you're contacting and getting data on, and that includes Kenneth. And so, boom, you wind up being in the harvesting process. The way to get around this is to avoid the big guys when you're dealing with activities online in any digital sense. Avoid Microsoft, avoid Apple, avoid Facebook, avoid Google. You're not going to be able to completely not deal with these people at all. But you can certainly begin to learn how to use Linux as an example, as an operating system. I use, not to give them a plug, but I use Proton Mail for my email. They encrypt it. They're in Switzerland. I've had very good experience with it. But if you take a little bit of effort, you can find at least 24 email people that are small, independent, private. They encrypt any emails that they have on your package, and they're outside of the United States. So that gives your emails a tremendous level of privacy that gives you protection against this kind of mass vacuum collection that is going on.
Well, that's really interesting advice, and it totally makes sense. Max, what is it that the solution for people other than to be proactive and do things to not be watched, what is the solution to fight against this oppressive beast?
Well, the solution, and I think this is one of the big game changers that the digital technology in our world has brought that never existed before. See, the situation we're in is not unusual. I mean, this cycle has occurred often, the struggle between centralized power and individualism. The difference is that now, for the first time, technologies are beginning to appear that allow individuals like you and me to start to become more and more and more anonymous online, as long as we take the trouble to use those technologies. Now, right now, they're not by any means secure. I'm not suggesting that you would ever want to do anything illegal online, because the chances are good that they will be able to catch you. But at this stage, just keeping the amount of information in their database that they have on you to a minimum, that's a victory. And one of the things that the Thieves Emporium does, aside from graphically making these points during the novel, is it provides you a large appendix of places that you can go to begin to learn how to do this. It's not a simple thing, it's not a trivial thing, and it does take a certain amount of effort. But now is the time to begin to learn. They go from everything from Tor, and the Tails USB drives, on up to discussing things like VPN, discussing things like going to various Linux systems on your computer and beginning to learn how to use those. Just a long list. Even things as simple as leaving your cell phone at home so that you're not tracked everywhere you go all the time. Those are all things you can do. Paying cash, of course, is another one.
And Max, you already started touching on it, but I wanted you to have an opportunity to just discuss, the book, a moment here, and kind of the most important, point that you wanted to share with people, that you feel, you can kind of summarize the book with, and just give people a reason why it's very important to be reading Thieves Emporium in today's day and time.
Well, the book is a primer on fighting back against what is fast becoming a predatory government, and doing it in the age of the internet, in the digital age. It doesn't talk about any one subject in great detail, but it talks about issues such as privacy, as we've been talking about. It talks about how to maintain financial anonymity, how to maintain communications anonymity, and the ways the government is trying to control us and the techniques that it's using. And then, after touching on a large number of these subjects, it provides you with an appendix in back that you can then use to begin to investigate more and more in individual areas which you find interesting and you want to begin to work on. That was the objective of the book, and judging by the fact that it's gotten a rating of 4.6 on Amazon with over 100 reviews, as an example, it tells me that it's been pretty successful at that.
Yeah. Well, it was a great book. I did get a chance to read a good portion of it, and then being able to speak with you today, it really is important, especially with what we're dealing with, and a situation where it's becoming so easy to monitor all of our actions. I mean, the internet was such a game changer. Just like Bitcoin is now going to be a game changer for the establishment, the internet was a game changer for people's privacy. So much convenience was added to our lives, but we exchanged that for a great deal of privacy. We have cash, we have our guns, and you know what? I really do appreciate the level of insight that you have extracted from all that's going on around us in this current day and time, and are just helping us be able to navigate through this without the threat of so much spying in on us. And you know what? You gave us some great points in this interview, Max. Thanks so much for coming on the show with me today.
Sure, Kath. It was a real pleasure. And if anybody is interested in taking a look at the book, of course, I'd love to have you do it. It's available at Amazon, Smashwords, Barnes & Noble, Apple. You can get it in any of those places.
Okay, sir. Well, thanks for coming on the show, and we'll be sure to do a follow-up interview in the next coming months.
Thank you, Kenneth. I would look forward to that.